welcome back to the channel. This video is going to be part 2 in my series on the New Age. So today we're going to talk about what may be the most controversial topic I've talked about, aside from my comment on Jesus and vegetarianism, and that is the law of attraction. My plan is to tackle this subject from multiple viewpoints. I do want to talk about the history of law of attraction. I want to get into some of the science behind some of the more new age ideas like consciousness affecting matter. But today I'm going to start by simply sharing my story with you. And just so you know, I actually don't like the phrase law of attraction. And I seriously considered calling it something else. But then I remembered how when I first began talking about universalism, I was afraid to say the word universalist. So I called it restorationism. And that was confusing to a lot of people. I still get messages from people about that today. So I've decided to just call the thing what it is most commonly known by. So let me share with you my experience with the law of attraction. And this has been a lifelong experience. When I was young, I became addicted to survival emotions. So survival emotions would be like shame, guilt, self-hatred, self-pity, lack, greed, pride, competition. You get the idea. Anything that is fear-based, based out of a belief in limitation or lack, out of a fight or flight response, as opposed to love-based emotions, which are based out of a belief in a benevolent, infinite, abundant, connected universe, like love, joy, peace, inspiration, transcendence, creativity, etc. So for me, because I experienced some trauma as a child and I was raised in a very repressive religious environment, women were looked down on, we were not allowed to have an opinion, we were told that we would not do anything of value in the world. We were disparaged from the pulpit. We were shamed for our bodies. On top of doctrines like total depravity that taught all human beings were filthy, rotten worms undeserving of love to begin with, I learned very early on to hate myself. I developed crippling amounts of shame and guilt simply for existing. I was programmed subconsciously that the universe is limited, that there was not enough to go around, that I didn't deserve anything, that I would never have anything. I learned to expect life to be miserable, that the worst would probably happen to me, that I deserved it when it did, and that I was completely powerless to influence reality at all. My highest purpose in life was to obey the authority. I am also a very introspective person. So combine these two things, the early addiction to survival emotions and the introspective personality, and what you get is a 14-year-old child whose favorite entertainment is to imagine worst case scenarios. And what that meant for me, because I was very socially awkward, I never had any friends. My first year in high school, I got my first friend. And every single day, I would imagine and play it out in my head that my friendship disintegrated. To this day, I can still remember the vivid scenes that I pictured in my head. I wanted to hurt myself. I believed I deserved it. And so I would make it very real, and I would feel the emotion of it, and I would do it with the intention to hurt myself. So remember, emotion and intention, that's going to come up over and over. Over the years, every single relationship that I ever had fell apart. This was my first experience with what is commonly known as the law of attraction. Of course, I had no idea at the time what was happening because I had been exposed to no spiritual teachings outside of fundamentalist Christianity. Fast forward to when I was 19, my depression had driven me to seek relief in the healing rooms of a charismatic megachurch in my area. And I did indeed experience a miraculous healing from depression. My misery lifted and I felt happiness for the first time in my life. This was also my first experience with faith healing, which was my first positive encounter with law of attraction. And of course, at the time, I still didn't know that's what it was. But I took that and I ran with it. I experienced several other miraculous healings, which I'll get to in a moment. My new church taught that the way we receive anything from God is through what's called faith. This is the way that we receive salvation from sin, and also how we receive healing, restoration, deliverance, financial provision, anything that God has promised to us in the Bible. And they were really big on God's promises because they were trying to keep it Christian. So if you could find it in the Bible, you could stand on it or believe for it, and God would be obligated to keep his word. This is what's called the Word of Faith movement, and it is the Christian version of law of attraction. And although I do have my criticisms of this movement, at this time in my life, it was exactly what I needed. It helped me to expand spiritually and opened me up to what was possible. I had some friends who were really caught up in the name it and claim it gospel who would use their faith to get things like new cars. I didn't doubt that it was possible because when you're in an environment like this, you are surrounded by people with stories. Everybody knows somebody who's had faith for a car, faith for a new job, faith for a financial provision. And at this point in my life, I certainly don't judge it or condemn it because I've been without cars and houses and jobs enough to know that having faith for a new car can be a pretty spiritual thing to do. But a lot of it came across really materialistic to me. What I was interested in was the healings. A couple years after my healing from depression, I developed a pain in my gut. It continued to worsen over a period of 8 months until it became so debilitating that it was very difficult for me to work. I lost a lot of weight. I got down to about just over 100 pounds because I had pain after eating. I became pale and sickly, and finally my doctor diagnosed me with irritable bowel syndrome. Now, I worked in the medical field at the time, so I knew what irritable bowel syndrome was and where it led. There was a healing service coming up soon at my church, and I decided I'm going to go get healed. I took the week before the service to isolate myself from the world and read story after story of people who had been healed from seemingly hopeless conditions. The night before the service, I had a mystical experience while on the phone with my soon-to-be husband, which left me with a deep sense of peace and knowing that I would be healed the next day. So I went into the healing service with a very strong intention. There was no other option in my mind except I'm going to the service and I'm going to be healed. And I also had created the feeling within myself of what it would feel like to be healed through reading all of the other people's stories. Again, I didn't know it at the time, but this is the magic combination for law of attraction. Firm intention combined with elevated emotion. I went to the healing service. I walked up and stood next to everybody else who was in line for prayer. My pastor blew on me and said, "Receive the Holy Spirit." Didn't pray, didn't know anything about my condition. That's it. I turned around and I walked out pain-free. Another condition I had developed over the course of several years was pain in my feet, which was eventually diagnosed as severe plantar fasciitis or collapsed arches. The pain intensified over a period of years as I was attending my new megachurch. I wanted to be healed of it. But I couldn't get past the mental barriers in my mind to believe that it was possible because it would require a physical structural change to my feet. So I continued to live with it for a total of 7 years, during which time I ended up moving across country and getting married to my husband. My first year out here, I had worked a job that I intensely disliked and was not good at, talking on the phone. Shortly after we were married, I mustered up the courage to leave that job and apply for a job as a housekeeper. After the first day on the job, I was in a pretty intense amount of pain. I told my husband, "I don't know if I can keep doing this job." And he said to me, "You've dealt with this pain for 7 years. Can you believe with me that your pain will be gone at the end of 3 weeks? Maybe an instantaneous healing is too much for you, but can you give it 3 weeks?" And I said yes. With my husband's faith supporting me and with the extended time frame and the motivation of wanting to keep the job that I loved, it didn't even take a week, guys. 7 years of suffering. And as soon as I was able to see it and feel it as if it had already happened, it was done. No prayer, nothing spiritual at all. Just making the decision, I'm going to be healed in 3 weeks' time. I have since experienced countless smaller healings in my life, so many that I've lost track. And eventually I broke away from the Word of Faith movement because it became really clear to me that they were grasping to put Christian language on a universal principle. And even worse, God was being made out to be like a genie in a bottle who was bound to bless you on the command of your faith, but didn't bless all those poor people who didn't know how to use the bottle or have faith. It was clear to me from my personal experiences that my religious belief didn't have anything to do with my healings, and that God wasn't making a choice to heal people or not based on their faith or lack of it. My healings occurred when I made a decision to be healed, when I was able to energetically align with a future state of health. Anything external, say a healing service or the laying on of hands or somebody else's supportive faith, served to create an atmosphere in which it was easier to align energetically. It gave something for the intention or the faith to latch onto, but it was always that moment of decision, that moment of clear intention and elevated emotions, creating a clear vision of the future in which I was healed every single time. It was the moment in which I knew and felt unequivocally, I am healed, that the healing occurred. So at this point, I couldn't keep pretending that faith healing was uniquely Christian, and I became wary of the whole process because I began to think this is New Age cloaked in Christian language, and I was wary at that point in my life of anything New Age. I thought that New Age was all demonic, but that was not to be the end of my adventure with law of attraction. Shortly after I got married, my husband and I entered into a difficult time which lasted for almost 10 years. I've shared this before, but we lost our jobs and our home twice. Shortly after I turned 29, my depression returned, and I began to fall into those old patterns where I would imagine the worst case scenario happening to me. And I'm embarrassed to say this, but just so you guys know how real you have to make this to get it to work, I still remember the vivid details of the scenes that I created in my mind. Sometimes it was so real to me that I would physically cry. How does this make sense? I don't know. I was depressed. I hated myself, and I was very addicted to the emotions of suffering. And what I started noticing was that the things that I would create and conjure up in my mind started happening in the real world, and they started happening faster and faster and faster until I could no longer deny that I was the one creating them. Around this time, I discovered Dr. Joe Dispenza on YouTube, and he was to become my greatest teacher. Dr. Joe teaches people how to use a clear intention combined with an elevated emotion to create positive change in their life. He doesn't use the word law of attraction because he's a scientist, and he describes and explains everything very scientifically and very professionally. So he helps people to undo the trauma-based emotions of their past and recreate themselves as they were meant to be and as they truly are, expressions of the divine, all in the context of a meaningful relationship with what he calls divine intelligence. Physical healing is also a major part of his work. He has, I don't know how many documented cases of healings from serious, incurable diseases. And when I began listening to him, I had a light bulb moment, and I realized this is what I've been doing. This is how I was healed of all of my ailments, and this is what I'm now using to create destruction and devastation in my life. Joe Dispenza has many meditations available now for people to use, but I was very afraid to try it in the beginning because I was afraid of getting involved in anything New Age or demonic, which is ridiculous because I was already using these principles and I knew it. I was so addicted to the negative emotions that I couldn't stop, even after I became aware of what I was doing. So what I did is I listened to Joe Dispenza's lectures every single day whenever my kids were sleeping, and I wouldn't do what he taught because I was so afraid of getting involved in New Age, but yet I kept using the same principles to create more destruction in my own life. Why was I so stubborn? Bottom line, it was all of my subconscious programming from childhood. I was unlovable. I didn't deserve anything. I wouldn't amount to anything. I was supposed to be miserable. I was willing to continue using my mind and emotions to tear my relationships apart and watch everything crumble around me, but I was unwilling to use my mind and emotions to create love and joy and connection. Because that would be too new age. That wouldn't be spiritual. In fact, what I finally came to realize is that the exact opposite is true. The fruits of the Spirit, or the evidence of God within you, is first and foremost love, joy, and peace. Those are the most spiritual emotions. So at the age of 29, shortly before I turned 30, I made the firm decision I'm going to change my life. I'm done living in misery. I'm done being depressed. I'm done watching my relationships crash and burn. I'm done being an emotional roller coaster all the time. And I'm going to create a new life. One in which I subconsciously believe and experience love, joy, peace. One in which I am inspired, fearless, and fulfilled. Where I can be who I was created to be, who I truly am as a daughter of the divine. And where I can do what I actually came here to accomplish. So I started doing hardcore morning meditations to change my subconscious beliefs, and I also started tracking my thoughts and feelings all day, every day. And I said, I am not going to think another thought or feel another feeling that is not in alignment with the truth of who God is, which is love. And I'm not going to think another thought that is not loving, joyful, peaceful, or inspired about myself, about my relationships, or about any circumstance in my life. I am not exaggerating. 4 days and I was living in heaven. I felt like I had a spring of love coming out of my heart, and I was surrounded by an ocean of love. I was experiencing absolute bliss. Nothing in my life circumstances changed. We were still struggling financially. My husband and I still had a lot of work to do on our marriage. Although I will say that as time went on and I lived consistently in a state of gratitude and joy and awe and inspiration, our outer world did start to change. But initially, the change happened in here, and how I felt and perceived and experienced everything. Everywhere I looked, I saw things to be thankful for and things to be inspired about and possibilities. And I understood for the first time what Jesus meant when he said, "You must be born again to see the kingdom of heaven." It was there all along, but I couldn't see it because of the negativity that I was carrying within me. This experience was so incredibly life-altering for me that I consider it my salvation experience. I woke up to the reality of God all around me when I came into alignment with God within me. I had no experience like this in all the years that I was in religion. Suddenly I understood what Jesus meant when he said, "Repent to enter the kingdom of heaven." Repent means change your mind. So I don't believe he was talking about wallowing in shame and guilt for your sin. In fact, the exact opposite. Stop living in shame and guilt and fear and greed and pride and lust and hatred and all of the survival emotions. Be purified within. Become like God within. I realize some of you are going to be upset with me for saying this, but yes, law of attraction is a real thing. Yes, it exists. Yes, it works. No, it is not Christian. No, it is not New Age. No, it is not demonic. It is a natural part of being a metaphysical or a spiritual being. It is something that we all have the ability to do, and it exists outside of religious contexts. The question is not whether it is real or whether you can use it. It is simply part and parcel of being a spiritual being that possesses a will and emotions. The question is, what are you using it for? Are you using it for control and power and to fulfill fleshly desires? Or are you using it for spiritual growth and for service, to create joy and beauty in the world for yourself and those around you? It's a tool. It's a spiritual gift. It can be developed and used for either good or evil purposes. It is a principle put in place to help us develop as spiritual beings, to discover our creative ability and evolve, but it also serves another purpose, to reflect back to us what we carry within us, to show us through trial and error that what we think we want will never satisfy us, to purge us of the error of all of our wrong desires until all we are left with is a pure desire to know God, at which point we will be able to experience Him fully. My biggest argument with modern law of attraction teachings is that they are often presented outside of any type of spiritual context. And law of attraction ends up being just another form of materialism, just another way to acquire all the things that we think will make us happy. Most law of attraction teachings are targeted at the ego. You can have anything you imagine or desire. You are in control of your life and you can create your dream life. When you get all of this money and stuff and all the right situations and all the right people in your life, then you'll be happy. And if someone chooses to go that route, there's nothing wrong with it. That's the purpose of the law of attraction, to teach us that attaining and possessing anything is an illusion. Many people see the law of attraction as a means to get something that will then make us happy. But the way that the law of attraction actually works is that we experience in the world what we are. And in order to change our experience of the outer world, we have to change who we are within. So to experience true happiness, we have to connect with and realize God within us. We have to stop seeing happiness as something outside of us that we can attain by having a certain amount of money or having the right people in our life, and become happiness at a being level. As Aaron Abke would say, there is no separate self or ego that can get anything or become anything. We are spirit or consciousness, and consciousness by its very nature is creative. The purpose of law of attraction is through trial and error to drive us to the realization of our true nature, that we already are perfect love, eternal creations of the divine, that we don't actually need or lack anything, and that everything that will satisfy us is already available to us within us. As Joe Dispenza says in the last chapter of his book, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, once you connect to and drink from the well of consciousness, you might experience a real paradox. It is quite possible that there will come such a sense of personal wholeness that you will find it difficult to want anything. This dichotomy was a veritable realization for me. Wants and desires come from lacking something, so the irony is that once you arrive at this space to create from, you no longer need anything, because the lack and emptiness from which you desired those things has been eliminated, replaced by a feeling of wholeness. This, I feel, is the beginning of true unconditional love. Feeling a sense of love and awe for life without needing anything from outside of us is freedom. This is when the greater consciousness that we are all connected to begins to move out of us, and we begin to express this through us. We become more loving, more mindful, more powerful, more generous, more intentional, more kind, and healthier. Something else amazing begins to occur as well. When you feel elevated and joyful, you will feel so wonderful that you will want to share the feeling of what you are experiencing with someone. And how do you share such great feelings? You give. And you will begin to give so that others can feel the gift of what you're expressing from within. You are selfless. Imagine a world like that. This is the law of attraction used properly. And I believe this is what Jesus meant when he said the kingdom of heaven is within you. This is what will bring the kingdom of heaven fully to this earth. This is what will heal our world. Be loved, be happy, be at peace, and thank you for watching.